What if I told you that one of the wealthiest nations on Earth has a lower life expectancy than a country with half its population? That citizens in one democracy can vote in 12 minutes while others wait 4 hours? These aren't hypotheticals. They're measurable differences between Australia and America. Over the next 12 minutes, we're going to explore 10 specific areas where Australia has implemented systems that produce demonstrably better outcomes than the United States. We're talking healthcare costs, electoral participation, worker protections, and more, all backed by data from organizations like the Commonwealth Fund, OECD, and government agencies for both countries. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button now. We're breaking down comparative policy outcomes with real numbers. And if you care about understanding what actually works in modern democracies, not just what sounds good in political speeches, you won't want to miss our future deep dives on global systems. Let's start with something that affects every single person: healthcare. Meet Evelyn and Jennifer. Both women, both 42 years old, both diagnosed with breast cancer in the same month of 2023. Evelyn lives in Sydney. Jennifer lives in Seattle. Evelyn walked into her local public hospital, received chemotherapy, radiation, and surgery, all covered by Medicare, Australia's universal healthcare system. Her out-of-pocket cost, $0. Jennifer, despite having insurance through her employer, faced $38,000 in deductibles and copays. She launched a GoFundMe campaign to cover treatment costs while fighting cancer. This isn't cherry-picking, it's systemic. According to the Commonwealth Fund's 2023 International Health Policy Survey, Australia ranks 5th globally in healthcare outcomes while America ranks 11th. Yet Australians spend an average of $6,134 per person annually on healthcare. Americans? $12,914. We're spending more than twice as much for worse results. Here's what most people don't realize about Australia's system. It's not purely government-run. Medicare provides baseline coverage for everyone: doctor visits, hospital care, essential medications. But Australians can also purchase private insurance for extras like private hospital rooms or elective procedures. It's a hybrid model that guarantees access while maintaining choice. The key takeaway? Universal health care doesn't mean eliminating private options. It means ensuring nobody goes bankrupt for medical bills. When 530,000 American families file for bankruptcy due to medical debt each year, according to the American Journal of Public Health, that's not a healthcare system. That's a catastrophe. But healthcare is just the beginning. Let's look at how these countries handle the most fundamental act in democracy: voting. November 2020. Maria stands in line at her polling place in Phoenix, Arizona. She arrived at 6 p.m. after work. It's now approaching 10 p.m., and she's still 200 people from the entrance. She has to be up at 5 a.m. for her shift. She's exhausted. That same day in Melbourne, Ahmed walks to his local primary school, converted into a polling station on this Saturday, waits 12 minutes, casts his ballot, and buys a democracy sausage from the fundraising barbecue outside. By noon, he's back home. This isn't luck, it's design. Australia has compulsory voting. If you're a registered citizen over 18, you must vote or pay a fine. Sounds restrictive, right? But here's the result: 95% plus voter turnout, according to the Australian Electoral Commission. America's 2020 election, despite being called historic turnout, reached 66% according to the U.S. Census Bureau. But compulsory voting only works if voting is actually accessible. Australian federal elections happen on Saturdays. Polling places are everywhere: schools, community centers. There's also extensive early voting and mail-in options. Compare that to America, where Tuesday voting, limited polling locations in certain areas, and varying state rules create barriers. There's another crucial difference: preferential voting, also called ranked choice. Australians rank candidates in order of preference. If no candidate wins a majority, the last place candidate is eliminated and their votes redistributed based on second preferences. This continues until someone has 50% plus one. Why does this matter? It eliminates the spoiler effect. You can vote for your actual favorite candidate without worrying about splitting the vote. According to electoral researchers at the University of Sydney, This system reduces negative campaigning and encourages coalition building. The takeaway: when voting is mandatory, accessible, and uses ranked choice, democracies reflect the actual will of the population, not just those with flexible schedules and the patience to wait in line. This emphasis on accessibility extends beyond voting booths into economic security. Marcus works full-time at a fast food restaurant in Brisbane. He makes $23.23 per hour. That's 32.80 Australian dollars, converted to US dollars. He gets 4 weeks of paid vacation annually, plus paid sick leave. His cousin David works the same job in Dallas, Texas. David makes $7.25 per hour, the federal minimum wage, unchanged since 2009. He has 0 paid vacation days and no sick leave. Both work 40 hours a week. Marcus earns roughly $48,300 annually. David, $15,080. According to Australia's Fair Work Commission 2024 data, the national minimum wage provides 53% of a median income. In America, the OECD reports it's 29%. This isn't a small gap. It's structural inequality baked into wage policy. Here's the real impact. In Australia, no person working full-time lies below the poverty line. That's by design. In America, the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics reports that approximately 11 million workers, 7% of the labor force, live in poverty despite working full-time. We call them the working poor, as if that's a natural category rather than a policy failure. Now, you might be thinking, sure, but those high wages must destroy business, right? Let's check. Australia's unemployment rate in 2024 averaged 4.1%. America's? 3.9%. Nearly identical. Australian businesses haven't collapsed. Small businesses still thrive. The economy hasn't imploded. What has happened is that Australian workers have purchasing power. They can afford rent, food, and occasional discretionary spending, which, surprise, stimulates the economy. It's almost like paying people fairly creates a healthier economic system. Key takeaway: a higher wage floor doesn't destroy economies. It redistributes resources toward labor. Whether that's good or bad depends on your values. But the economic catastrophe opponents predict simply hasn't materialized in Australia. Financial security continues after work ends, which brings us to retirement. Mary teaches high school English in Melbourne. Lisa teaches the same subject in Los Angeles. Both are 35. Both earn roughly equivalent salaries accounting for exchange rates. But their retirement futures look radically different. Mary's employer is legally required to contribute 11.5% of her salary to her superannuation account, Australia's mandatory retirement savings system. This contribution happens automatically before she even sees her paycheck. It's separate from her salary, not deducted from it. Over 30 years of teaching, assuming modest investment returns, Mary will retire with approximately $600,000 in today's dollars. Lisa has a 401k option. But here's the catch. Her school district only matches contributions if Lisa contributes first. With rent, student loans, and basic expenses, Lisa can't afford to set aside money for retirement. Her employer contributes nothing. According to Vanguard's 2023 analysis, the average Australian retires with superannuation balances of $402,838. The median American retirement savings? $255,000. And that includes people who save diligently. Millions have far less or nothing at all. Australia introduced compulsory superannuation in 1992 under the Superannuation Guarantee. The system now manages $3.5 trillion AUD, one of the largest pools of retirement savings globally. It's not perfect. There are debates about fees and fund performance, but it removes retirement planning from individual willpower and makes it a structural guarantee. The key insight: when employers are legally required to contribute to retirement savings automatically, workers actually retire with dignity. When it's optional or dependent on employee contributions, millions fall through the cracks. Australia also rethinks how to handle one of society's most vulnerable populations, and one of its most controversial topics. April 28, 1996. Port Arthur, Tasmania. A lone gunman killed 35 people and wounded 23 others in Australia's deadliest mass shooting. The nation was horrified. Within weeks, Prime Minister John Howard, a conservative leader from the Liberal Party, worked with state governments to pass the National Firearms Agreement. The law banned semi-automatic and automatic rifles and shotguns, introduced stricter licensing, and launched a mandatory buyback program that removed 650,000 firearms from circulation. Here's the result. According to Rand Corporation's definition of mass shootings, incidents where 4 or more people are killed, Australia has had 0 in the 28 years since Port Arthur. Meanwhile, the Gun Violence Archive reports that America averaged over 600 mass shootings annually between 2020 and 2024. We're not talking about slightly worse. We're talking about a fundamentally different reality. The University of Sydney conducted a comprehensive study examining the reform's impact. Firearm homicide rates dropped 50% in the 2 decades following the law's implementation. Firearm suicide rates decreased 57%. These aren't marginal improvements. They're transformational. Now, here's what this doesn't mean. Australians can't own guns. They absolutely can. There are currently around 3.5 million registered firearms in Australia, roughly 1 gun for every 7 people. For context, America has more guns than people. Australians can obtain licenses for hunting, sport shooting, and farming purposes. What they can't easily access are semi-automatic weapons designed for rapid-fire capacity. The nuance matters. This isn't about banning all firearms. It's about limiting access to weapons whose primary design purpose is killing many people quickly. After a national tragedy, Australia implemented comprehensive reform and produced measurable long-term safety improvements. Was it politically difficult? Absolutely. John Howard wore a bulletproof vest to some rallies. But prioritizing public safety over ideological purity created a society where parents don't worry about school shootings and moviegoers don't check for exits. Safety extends beyond gun violence to how nations handle consumer protection. Olivia bought a laptop in Perth for $2,000. 13 months later, the screen died. The manufacturer's warranty? 1 year. In America, Olivia would be out of luck. Tough break, buy a new one. But Olivia lives in Australia. She contacted the store, citing Australian consumer law, which provides statutory guarantees that can't be waived by manufacturers. The law states that products must be of acceptable quality and last a reasonable time based on their price and nature. A $2,000 laptop dying after 13 months? Not reasonable. The store repaired it at no cost. John had the same laptop issue in Chicago. Same manufacturer, same defect. The company told him his warranty expired and offered to repair it for $600. He paid because he needed it for work. Australia's consumer protections, enforced by the ACCC, Australian Competition and Consumer Commission, shift the power balance toward consumers. Companies can't hide behind warranty fine print. If a product fails prematurely given its price point, consumers have legal recourse. American consumers have the FTC and state-level protections, but they're generally weaker and more fragmented. Companies set warranty terms, and consumers either accept them or don't buy the product. Here's the practical takeaway. Legal frameworks determine whether consumers or corporations have leverage in disputes. Australia decided that expensive products should work for reasonable periods, and companies must stand behind their goods beyond arbitrary warranty windows. These protections reflect a broader difference in banking regulation. Remember 2008? The global financial crisis that originated in American subprime mortgages and crashed the world economy? Australia does, but they experienced it very differently. While American banks required $700 billion in TARP bailouts and multiple institutions failed, Australia's Big Four banks, Commonwealth Bank, Westpac, ANZ, and NAB, weathered the storm without government rescue packages. In fact, no Australian bank has failed since 1931. Why? The APRA, Australian Prudential Regulation Authority, maintains stricter capital requirements and oversight. Australian banks were required to hold more reserves, engage in less risky lending, and maintain higher equity buffers. When the crisis hit, they had cushions to absorb losses. This isn't about Australian banks being naturally more virtuous. It's about regulatory frameworks that prioritize stability over short-term profit maximization. Proactive regulation prevented crisis rather than reactive rescue. The trade-off? Australian banking may be less innovative and potentially less profitable for shareholders. But depositors and taxpayers don't face the risk of catastrophic failure. Financial stability connects to how countries structure education costs. Jake is studying engineering at the University of Queensland in Brisbane. Amy is studying the same field at a public university in Boston. Both are from middle-class families without significant savings. Jake pays nothing up front. Australia's HSCS help system, Higher Education Contribution Scheme, allows students to defer all tuition costs. After graduation, when Jake earns above $54,000 annually, a small percentage of his income automatically goes toward repaying his student loan through the tax system. If he never earns above that threshold, he never repays. If he dies with outstanding debt, it's forgiven. The loan is indexed to inflation, typically 1-3%, not commercial interest rates. There are no credit checks, no private lenders, and no collection agencies threatening garnishment. Amy wasn't so fortunate. She took out federal student loans at 6.8% interest and graduated with $110,000 in debt. According to Federal Reserve education data, this is slightly above average for her degree. Her monthly payment will be $1,277 for 10 years, assuming she never misses a payment and doesn't need to defer. The Australian system is income contingent rather than time contingent. You pay based on earnings, not fixed schedules. This removes the barrier to entry. Anyone accepted to university can attend regardless of family wealth, while ensuring repayment from those who benefit economically from their degrees. Is it perfect? No. Debates continue about indexation rates and total debt levels. But the system fundamentally removes the scenario where 22-year-olds start adult life with mortgage-sized debt and no house. Key takeaway: how you structure education financing determines whether higher education is accessible based on merit or wealth. Education access pairs with another fundamental difference in childcare support. Chun and her husband just had their first baby in Sydney. Rodriguez and his wife just had theirs in San Antonio. Both families are thrilled, but their next year will look dramatically different. Chin receives 20 weeks of government-funded parental leave paid at the national minimum wage. Not luxury money, but enough to cover basics. She can split this time with her husband. Her employer also provides additional leave. Between government and employer benefits, Chin will spend 6 months with her newborn without financial catastrophe. Rodriguez had to return to work after 2 weeks because his employer doesn't offer paid leave and he can't afford unpaid time off. His wife, still recovering from C-section, is alone with their newborn during the day. They're exhausted, stressed, and financially strained. Here's the stunning reality. According to the World Policy Analysis Center's 2024 study, the United States is one of only 6 nations worldwide, out of 193, without any national paid parental leave policy. We're in company with Papua New Guinea, Suriname, and a few small Pacific Island nations. Australia's system was expanded in recent years to 20 weeks, soon increasing to 26 weeks. The Australian Institute of Family Studies has documented improved maternal health outcomes, better child bonding, and higher rates of breastfeeding associated with paid leave policies. The policy reflects a philosophical difference. Is childbearing a private decision that families should fund entirely themselves, or is it a societal investment in the next generation that warrants public support? Australia chose investment. America chose individual responsibility. The outcomes differ accordingly. Finally, these policies reflect fundamentally different approaches to our planet's future. Australia is often stereotyped as a coal-dependent economy, and there's truth to that when you look at exports. But domestically, something remarkable is happening. According to the Clean Energy Regulator, Australia reached 40% renewable electricity generation in 2024. The U.S. Energy Information Administration reports America hit 21% the same year. In South Australia specifically, the state achieved 100% renewable energy for multiple consecutive days in 2023, an entire state powered exclusively by wind and solar, supplemented by battery storage. Not for an hour, for days. How did this happen? Geography helps. Australia has exceptional solar resources and strong coastal winds. But policy matters too. The National Electricity Market coordinates renewable integration across states. Projects like the Hornsdale Power Reserve, one of the world's largest lithium-ion batteries, stabilize the grid when intermittent renewable sources fluctuate. Let's be clear about the nuance. Australia remains one of the world's largest coal exporters. The country profits enormously from fossil fuel exports to Asia. There's significant hypocrisy in transitioning domestically while selling coal internationally. This contradiction remains unresolved in Australian policy. But in terms of domestic consumption, the trajectory is clear. Renewables are cheaper, the infrastructure exists, and political momentum, despite resistance from fossil fuel interests, continues forward. The contrast with America is notable. Despite having similar geographic advantages in regions like the Southwest, political polarization around climate change has slowed federal renewable investment. States like California and Texas are leaders, but national coordination lags. Key takeaway: rapid renewable transitions are technically feasible when geography, policy, and investment align, but political will remain the constraining factor everywhere. So what does all this tell us about policy effectiveness? We've explored 10 policy areas where Australia produces measurably different outcomes than America. Let's identify the pattern. Universal systems, healthcare, voting access, retirement contributions produce more equitable outcomes. When benefits are guaranteed rather than market-based, fewer people fall through cracks. That's not ideology, that's math. But here's the trade-off. Australians pay higher taxes. The average Australian tax rate is approximately 23% compared to 13.29% in America. These programs cost money, and that money comes from taxation. So what's the cost benefit? The OECD Better Life Index consistently ranks Australia higher than America in life satisfaction, work-life balance, and health outcomes, despite Australia having slightly lower GDP per capita. Australians live longer, report less financial stress, and express higher trust in institutions. Does this mean Australia is perfect? Absolutely not. The country faces serious challenges. Housing affordability in major cities is extreme. Indigenous Australians experience significant disadvantage, and immigration detention policies have drawn international criticism. But the core insight remains: policy design matters more than rhetoric. Implementation determines results. Australia chose certain priorities: universal health care, accessible voting, retirement security, and built systems to achieve them. America chose different priorities: individual choice, market solutions, state-level variation, and got different results. Neither is objectively better without defining what better means. But if we care about outcomes like health, economic security, and democratic participation, the data shows clear differences in approach and result. We've explored 10 measurable areas: healthcare access, electoral participation, minimum wage, retirement security, gun safety, consumer protection, banking stability, education financing, parental leave, and renewable energy, where Australian policy produces different outcomes than American approaches. Here's what I genuinely want to know. If you could implement just one of these Australian systems in America tomorrow, which would you choose and why? Would it be universal health care to eliminate medical bankruptcy? Ranked choice voting to improve representation? Mandatory retirement contributions so everyone retires with dignity? Share your reasoning in the comments below, not just which system, but why you think that particular change would have the greatest impact. I'm reading every comment. If you want to explore how other countries approach these challenges, check out our video on Nordic social systems next. We break down Sweden, Norway, and Denmark with the same evidence-based approach. And if you found this comparison valuable, even if you disagreed with parts, subscribe for more deep dives on global policy differences that actually matter. We cut through political talking points to examine what measurably works around the world. Thanks for watching. Let's keep the conversation going in the comments.